All righty. What's up, brother?
Pete.
Man, this is good. Back to back. I was setting it up this morning, and I usually don't do this. I set them up individually, and I said, man, I got to send three because Dave Hillgrove's after you. I said, got to send three separate ones. No, I just use the same studio. But if you do that, you have to have an ending and a beginning, but we won't have that. So,
Well, there we
good
go.
here. I have a series of questions, but I want you to share with our viewers who you are, what you do, and maybe a fun fact that you could share that the your classmates don't know about you.
I'm an open book, Pete. Peter Maxwell. I'm also a member of the class. I'm the other Pete in the class of 75 at Benedictine. And I'm a dad. I'm a husband for almost 39 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been in the car business. I guess the three places that I've spent the most of my working time is in the restaurant business, in the Navy, and in the car business in some form or fashion. So that's been my career. Currently, I am retired as of April 1st of this year.
Mm-hmm.
So just celebrated like my 1 month anniversary of being retired, and I'm actually doing a little bit of consulting with the company that I was working for, keeping it to a minimum, and
Yeah.
spending a lot of time with grandkids and spending time on the boat. So
Awesome. Well, we're going to get into grandkids in a minute. So I want to give some basic questions that are common enough that people would be able to kind of, see where people are to connect. But what would you say? What's the one thing about your life today that your 18-year-old self would be surprised or proud of?
probably there's a lot of things, and I think when people think about that and they answer it, I mean, it's very difficult to look forward at 18 and think about. One thing is that I've been married for 39 years. That's kind of mind blowing to me because I think my 18-year-old self could not think about much other than my 18-year-old self. and to be married for 39 years, you got to do a whole lot of thinking about somebody else and other people and other implications. And I think the surprising part of it is how you learn to get outside of yourself. You learn to see the impact that you've had. And I think as an 18-year-old, I had really no mind of purpose or thoughts beyond the immediate.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm proud of the fact of that journey that I've taken to, maturity is one of those trigger words, right? It's just
Yes.
a journey to being able to think outside of myself and to think about others, and it's what I've tried to do for most of my life.
That's good. I know about the car journey, but I don't know about the restaurant part of it. What
So,
share with us a little bit about the restaurant part.
so my dad, from the time he got out of the Navy, he spent 22 years in the Navy and got out when I was very, very young, second grade maybe. So
Mm-hmm.
from that point forward, he was a manager of country club. So he ran Richmond Country Club. That's how we wound up in Richmond in the first place. And it's funny. I do a little bit of writing, and some time ago, a large number of years ago, I remember back on my first job. And Hampton Carver will appreciate this because he did the same job. And working for my dad, he called me one Mother's Day. I remember being at home, and he called the house and said, "Hey, you want to make some money?" And I was like, "Yeah." And Pete, I had to be 10, 11 maybe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his dishwasher had quit at the country club. And as you know, Mother's Day is a pretty huge
Yeah.
buffet day. So he brought me there, threw an apron on that was too big, piled up a couple of those old wooden Coca-Cola crates, and
Yeah.
put me at the pot sink. And there was an old chef there who was a hard-nosed son of a gun. And he had me scrubbing pots until you could see your face in them and shine. And they're all sticky and nasty. But I just remember, that hard work and getting the cash in hand that night from my dad, because he paid me off the books, obviously.
Yeah.
But from that moment on, I either worked there. I was a bartender in high school, waiter, worked in that business, was in the Navy. The family opened our own restaurant. We had a restaurant on Patterson Avenue. But I left that restaurant and decided to go do something else. And I got in the car business. I actually went to work for Clark Hyman selling cars.
Okay.
And then expanded from there. And now I'm a consultant to the industry. And so it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, the dishwashing journey, I have one similar. I worked at a Chinese restaurant on Hull Street, and this was, I worked at the country club too, dishwashing, but this was a little outside of, I didn't know anybody. So when I got the job, but I remember him doing this, the rice would come back from the tables. We would scrape, they would tell us to scrape off the gravy and throw the rice. Cook it again and send it back out. Rice, cheap as rice was. And I'm just like, I don't know, 16, 15, whatever it was.
Sure.
I'm just like, oh, no problem. We can save some rice. So
saving the planet, man. Just recycle that rice.
Hey, let's recycle the rice. So yeah, I forgot about the Richmond Country Club. Now I do remember, because when I come up to Richmond the last couple of times, I go to a Rotary at Richmond Country Club.
Okay.
Morning. Yeah. So I go there, and I was a member for a couple of years. So, it was kind of reconnecting with and seeing the place and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Richmond Country Club. Oh yeah, that's good. Okay. So let's say, what's a lesson you learned that you wish you could go back and share with your younger self?
Yeah, I remember seeing these questions ahead of time, and I think there's a lot of talk when you look in various business things and sales and leadership stuff, and I'm a student of leadership, that talk about imposter syndrome. And I think imposter syndrome arises because we have a tendency to meet people exactly where they are and not think about what it took to get them to where they are. And I think as we're kids, we look at the great athletes that are around us. For example, in high school, we look at the Les Hensons and the John McDonalds and the Jay Hankeys and those folks. Oh man, I could never be that. I could never do that. And it's the same thing with the good students. And I'm struggling to name a couple of those, but there were like, almost everybody on that list was ahead of me when it came to that.
Yeah.
But as you go through life, you realize, wow, I've got skills. I've got, special things. And it's not about being all you can be in the moment that you encounter somebody, that whether it's recency bias or snapshot bias or whatever it talks about. Mm-hmm. It's a long journey to get somebody to where they are today, no matter when you meet them. And I think we have a tendency to discount that and just say, oh man, they're so good at what they do. I could never be that good because look how far ahead of me they are. I don't have that natural gift. And there was a couple of good books that I read. Grit was a real good book that talks about the most successful or very tenacious people that are excited to fail because they learn and get better from there. And Mindset was another one that was really good that just changed the way I looked at things a lot. So
yeah,
I would tell that 18-year-old self two things, right? One is understand that whatever you put your mind to, whatever you're willing to invest into, you may not become the best, but you will become incrementally better at whatever you do to the point where you're going to be comfortable. In golf, man, I'm horrible at golf, but people that are good golfers are not necessarily natural athletes, all of them. You can be a great natural athlete that doesn't apply, principles and practice, or you can be a really mediocre athlete who practices and they can meet on the field of competition. So there's that. The other thing I would tell myself, and I tell other 18-year-olds, is to stop listening to people that tell you to go find your passion, and instead bring your passion to whatever you do. Because I can't imagine what I was passionate about that was going to make a difference in the world or in my life when I was 18 years old. I don't think there
totally
was anything, right? So bring your passion to what you do and not worry about finding something that's going to give you passion. So anyway.
No, that is so good. I totally, people will say too, like, what's your mission? What's your purpose? It's not like this grandiose thing. It's showing up each time, showing up with passion, showing up with purpose. I too had a friend. I had heard about mindset, but she gave me that book a couple years ago. And, you know, I found myself thinking I had an open growth mindset, but there were certain things that I had a closed, fixed mindset.
Yeah.
Just individual thing I was going, dang, I really didn't open up my mind to a belief system. I went into it with closed. And I thought all along I had a growth mindset, but I think we always gotta really check our mind at the door and make
Yeah,
sure we are.
I agree. I think we got to check our premise, and we so much of our life is spent deciding that something has to be A or B, and or black or white. And so much of life is gray. The decision you make, and you look back and you go, I really love the Navy. If I'd have stayed in the Navy, I'd have had this great retirement and this. But I'd have never met my wife. I'd have never had my kids. I'd have never had my grandchild. So all of the decisions that we make are kind of stacked. And to say that,
Yeah.
gee, I wish I would change this one thing, but I think that's most law. We get wrapped around the axle on right and wrong so hard that and worried about decisions. And you brought up a great point about purpose. I mean, what pressure do we put on an 18-year-old kid to tell them to have purpose in their life?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, oh
Yeah.
my God. I mean, if I don't have purpose, then I'm behind, and we're stressing our kids out really too bad, I believe. But anyway.
No, I agree with you, and I think I'm big on. Fred was saying I had things here. If you could look behind my computer, I've got all kinds of stuff that I look at each day as reminders, because we have between 12 and 60,000 thoughts that go through our brain, our mind. And if we replay those negative things, like I can't do it, or I'm not good as that person, so I shouldn't be in that group, whatever it is, then
Sure.
we start believing that, because we keep whatever we think about the most, it expands. So you
There's
got
no
to be
doubt.
how you approach things with a fixed mindset. It'll keep you closed to anything that you should be really keeping a growth mindset.
I would have probably told myself as well to be comfortable with failure, and to hit every failure as a new opportunity to learn or grow.
Totally.
I've recently started thinking along the lines of the Stoics, right? Which is no matter what bad thing happens to you, love where you are. Amor fati is the Latin expression. And I'm sure I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, and Neil or Bobby McIntyre or somebody can correct me later. But love your fate, and whether your fate's positive or negative in a sense, but to love it, because that helps build who you are and who you're going to be and what your future relationships are. But that's a little deeper than I planned to get for a 50-year reunion conversation.
All right. Well, it was funny because I was talking to Bobby McIntyre, and I think it was Fred or somebody, but we were saying, like, there's some people that I haven't seen in 50 years because I've been gone for 42, 43. Now my family lives there, so I go back, but I'll go back, and then with two sisters, two brothers, and a mom there, you're running around taking care of and visiting family, so you don't have that much time when you're back. But the question was, people were writing good bios, and that wasn't my forte is writing. So I'm going like, oh my gosh, it would take me 10 years, even with AI, to come up with something. So I said, instead of showing up at the reunion and saying, hey, Peter, what have you been up the last 45 years? It's
Yeah.
like, and tell me in 5 minutes or less. It's just kind of weird because we haven't seen each other in a lot of
No.
years. So you don't have that natural connection like, hey, yeah, it was cool. We were cooking out 2 weeks ago and we did this. We don't have a lot of those connecting. But I want
You
to
don't.
shift a little bit because a little off script. When you're in the career, you're pouring into your career, and I found that as you become a grandparent and you're not slowing down, but at a different journey in your career, how has your grandkids versus the busyness of your kids, what's the difference in how you show up for your grandkids versus, when you're building a family and you got your kids?
That's a really, really good question, Pete. It's a question that I've kind of thought about from time to time. My oldest grandson is 7, the youngest is 3. My daughter's 2 boys. And I would think about I think when you're a parent, and there's a lot of pieces to this, right? I think when you're a parent, you think like you've got infinite time. Um, to be there. And if you miss this game, yeah, there's the next game. Or if you're short or tempered or just disagreeable on a given evening, or there's going to be another one. And I don't need to take the time to understand why my son has been in such a horrible mood because yeah, whatever, he's just being a kid.
Yeah.
I think the stakes change as a grandfather. I am not responsible necessarily for their future and their discipline and their behavior, but I am responsible for some of their character. I am responsible for giving them a sense of family history, and it's a lot more fun, I think, because you don't have that responsibility. You don't have the embarrassment. I mean, when the youngest kid wants to take off his shirt in the grocery store, I don't care. you know, when my other grandson, the older one, wants to drive the boat, I'm not worried about if he bumps the dock when he's coming in. I'm teaching him how to dock the boat. He's 7 years old. It's going to bump. So I
Right.
think you're a lot more relaxed as a
Yeah.
grandfather, but you also, I think, have a better sense for how precious those moments are
Yep.
and for how important they are to you as well as to your grandchild.
I love that. I was, didn't know what your answer was going to be, but I totally agree because you do think you've got all the time in the world when you're younger. But as you get older, you realize you only have a certain amount of Christmases, a certain amount of birthdays, and so you approach it differently, and you are more present because we're not guaranteed tomorrow, and you realize how precious life is, and so you approach it differently. I
Mm-hmm.
know I go out with my 3 oldest on dates every month. We do a separate date night. And the 5-year-old, we're at Starbucks. We've been to lunch. We've been to the game place and entertainment place. And we're sitting in Starbucks. And this is 5 years old. And she's just enjoying a Frappuccino. And she looks at me and she goes, this is the best day ever. And I'm going like, oh my gosh, I had to maintain without losing it because it absolutely hit me like a freight train that a 5-year-old would make a comment like that.
Wow.
But
Isn't that great?
when you approach it and you're so present, because I used to, like, I have ADD, and so I had the active brain, so I was always have stuff going on in my brain, but I've since calmed it down, so I'm more present than I ever have been. And I think that just makes a difference when
I
you're
think I think being present not just the grandchildren, but in general. I mean,
Yes.
we do, and I think we label things. It's ADD or whatever it is, but I do think there is I think there's something in all of us, men and boys in particular. I think that our mind is at the next thing, or maybe it's at the previous thing, right? But it's rarely where it needs to be, which is right here. Um, I learned a lesson with my son, and I credit my wife with this. And I
Hmm.
think we all disconnect with our children at a certain period of time in life, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And she, I started thinking, well, I've got a lot of expectations on my son. I, wanted him to be an athlete. I wanted him to be this, or I wanted him to be that. And my wife looked at me and said, "Have you ever thought about what he wanted? Have you ever thought about letting him lead the conversation and talk about what was important to him?"
Mm.
And she said, "You're the sales coach and this leadership coach, and you can't figure out that what you're trying to teach younger leaders is the same thing you need to learn about your
Mm.
own son." And I took it to heart, and it was, of course, she didn't use quite that language. She's, started with "you stupid" and ended in something else.
This is a
But
PG podcast.
yeah, I saw the note. Yeah. So, but I think we found a place there. And he's a senior leader in IT firm now, and but that was where he was, right? And I couldn't see how important that was to him, and I couldn't see because it wasn't important to me. And I think we connected, and I've tried to keep that in mind when my grandsons want to talk about Paw Patrol or some other, it's interesting to them. It's what's important to them at that moment, and that's where we stay.
Yeah, that is good. In my Rotary, she's a judge, and I met her sons, and we were talking the other day. The parents lay that foundation, but that community around them helps them grow because they see you as dad. And dad's a little different than Uncle Johnny or the friend of dad's. And so you have to wrap yourself in that community because it
Mm-hmm.
does take, I think I heard like Hillary Clinton say,
Yeah,
take,
yeah, the whole village thing. Yeah.
would really look for her for parenting advice. But what I think it does have some cool things about the people that surround our kids, and that we can be intentional about influencing good people to be around them to help them grow beyond just the initial foundation that
I
you
think that's very, very true, regardless of who said it when. I think it is about, it's not about relying on everybody else. I think it's about being intentional in who you surround your family with and who you
yeah.
choose to be your friends and where you choose to be. And yeah, very much so.
Yes, that is good. So, okay, now I want to go on to another one. What path, okay, what path did you take after high school, and was it the one you expected to take?
Well, I'll start with the second half first, and I'll say no. I had, well, my expectations were I was one of those kids that I didn't know from the day I was, aware. I want to do this, and I want to go become a doctor, and I learned. I still don't have any idea what I want to be when I grow up. Um, but the path I took is didn't do well. I was not a great student. Got into VCU and kind of floundered that first year, not sure what I wanted.
Hmm.
Bummed around for a little while. I stopped that year and I wound up in the Navy. And I think the Navy gave me that time to begin to figure out who I was, answer some questions, figure out I was good at some things, got recognized for being good. And that gave me some level of confidence. And, went to work, always worked, always felt like labor of some type of mind or hand or whatever was critical to who I was.
Yeah.
I wound up selling cars because I felt like I could sell and I could.
Hmm.
Um, had a business for 18 years that was a consulting, an agency to automobile dealers. And then from there, as I'd like to describe it, my business partner and I helped get bigger boats for our attorneys. and finally, we got to someplace that made sense. And I went to work for a company. I've been there. I retired after 15 years with them, and he's moved on as well. But it's been a varied career.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been a path of discovery.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think that I'm a lifelong student. Hopefully, I'm a better student in the latter part of my life than I was in the very early part. I would say that I am, and it's been a journey of learning and experiences, and of giving to other people a sense of who they are. And leadership has always been a big important thing to me to learn more about and to show. Now that I'm a little older and towards the last part of my career, I felt it very important to help younger leaders find their stride, and to not read all the nonsense that shows up on LinkedIn or other social media about a leader is this and a manager is that. I mean, you got to be all of it, and it's okay to make mistakes. Make lots of them, right? And it'll be okay. So that's been an important thing. So my path has been varied and winding and long, but a lot of fun.
And we're challenged by new things. So the old path that I know my dad, well, kind of, yeah, sort of, and a lot of people, they worked for a company for 40 years, 30 years. That's no longer, because you got the gig economy. You got our younger kids are moving around. They're looking for different things. They saw what our parents did as far as a long career generally, and they said, I want to do it a little differently. I want to have some fun. I want to try different things. Do you see that in your kids? Are there any kind of signs of that?
It's funny that you say that, right? Because my son got the job offer for the company that he's with now Thanksgiving of his senior year in college. And, so Evan's been there, 12 years? I mean, he's had one career job his entire, so I'd say he contradicts what I see a lot in generally, but I think I don't know that I blame it all on younger people. I blame a lot of it on businesses. And when your dad and my dad were coming up, their generation, there was a promise that was made, and they had defined benefit programs. They had good healthcare programs. They had competitive incomes, and I think there was a little bit more of a path and a promise. Now, if you want to get ahead, and I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong. I'm just saying that up until just probably the last 6 or 7 months, the way to get in a substantial pay raise was to change companies. It's less so now. That's starting to dial back a little bit. But it was, if you want to move up, move around. And I think not that anybody should be blamed. It is what it is. But if it's uncomfortable with something we want to do, I think both sides have to change. But I think businesses have to offer people a reason to stick around, as opposed to, and it has to be more than the money. It's got to be the culture. It's got to be the feeling. So,
what would you say? Because I was telling people down here, I'm going to my 50th high school reunion, and I think Bobby gave me the numbers. Like the average is 15% come back to the 50th. And ours is quite a bit higher, and even a private school is higher than normal, but ours was even more. I mean, even higher than that. What do you think? Like when it comes to relationships, I see people say, "No, I never talked to anybody from high school." And what do you think relationships? What would you say that had a bearing on your career? Like, you could tell our viewers, even like younger people getting starting out, how important was those relationships in your journey in your career?
as someone, and I can't think I'm almost positive when I say this that I'm correct, that I haven't missed one 5-year reunion.
Hmm.
So I've been to everyone. I think we skipped COVID and then we had one the next year or however. But I've been to every reunion that's been held. I've attended.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably the early part of my lesson about relationships. We all look at ourselves differently, and we're awkward in those high school years, some more than others, right? It's a really weird time, but I always felt home, and I think people, as hard a time as we would give each other. I mean, because we were boys, and we'd tease each other, we'd make fun of each other. Our own insecurities would play out on somebody else, but at the end of the day, I think there was a bond that was there, that it's only gotten stronger over the years. And I think one of the things that attracted me to the company that I've worked for the past 15 years is that they put so much emphasis on relationship in a real way, not just a corporate logo way. But they talk about the levels of relationship, R1, R2, R3, R4, and how surface relationships are cordial all the way down to, if something happened and your daughter was driving through some town I happened to be in, I'd stop what I'm doing. Never having met your daughter, but you mean that much to me. That's a deep R relationship. And I think that I would say that the two things that a young person needs to be able to do, and they're interdependent on each other, is one is to be able to tell stories and connect emotionally as opposed to factually and logically.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can connect emotionally, you'll have deeper relationships. And if you have deeper relationships, you'll be able to bring more emotion to what you do. So they're kind of interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
But I think relationships are the foundation of everything. And they don't have to be everyday nurtured kind of relationships. Our reunion is a good example of that, right? I mean, we'll show up there and there will be people I haven't seen in, I hope, in 50 years. That there are some folks out there that maybe haven't been around. I sure hope they come to the 50th, because there's not a one of them that I don't want to see,
Yeah. No, I totally, I was talking, I had Beetle on last week or something, and we both, Leo, myself, and Beetle, went to Pat Conran's wedding. And, so that was, many, many years ago, but I haven't seen him in 45 years. And it's like,
just got to show up at Eat 33 like every Thursday, and you'll he'll be there.
It's so cool that we only have 1/50th. So if you miss it because you're feeling a little awkward about being around, it's just like I think Andy said it. He goes, "We're just going to laugh, talk about old times. We just have those funny things, and if you can laugh a little bit, enjoy each other's company, then it's been great, because life is precious, very precious, as we get a little older, and we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So
no, we're not. We're not guaranteed 51.
No, exactly. Yeah. It's just okay. Now, who was someone from your school days who made a lasting impression on you? Maybe a teacher, somebody like that?
It's always hard to, like I said, there's, A or B, black or white. And for me, there's always several things that fall into that bucket. And I think Father Adrian had a huge impact on my life. I don't know that I knew it early on, but then as time went on, you realize how much the man cared about each of us. It's pretty impressive. And Father Augustine did a lot for me. Both of them helped me find inner strength that I didn't know I had. But it was funny, because as I read your question, I was looking at it, guy popped in my head. It was John McDonald. And, I'd say John and I were no more or less close than, anybody that I was, close with at Benedict. But I always remember John as having those qualities of leadership. And I don't even know that I would have put that label on it then.
Yeah.
But he wore it. he was always encouraging. And I remember, being on the football team and being the slowest guy out there on the field trying to run around and do the laps. And John was always there, man, with a hand, with encouragement and positivity. And I think that helped me develop that positivity and encouragement of others. So it was kind of weird. I haven't thought about it in years. You asked the question, and this image of John McDonald popped into my head. So,
yeah, there's been some common answers. I'm not going to go into them because I want to cover just a little bit more. What's been one of the most meaningful or proudest moments in your life so far?
It's another tough and very, very good question. And I think I have this philosophy that it's really kind of cheating to be proud of someone else's accomplishments. So when I think about my two kids, I'm proud of who they became, but I'm joyful for who they became, I guess, if that's I take a lot of joy more than I do pride, because it's not like an author of a story.
Yeah.
You didn't write that book. I know some really, really good parents whose kids have not turned out well, and some people that were really remote and not super involved whose kids turned out incredible. So I take a lot of joy for the character that my children have, the resiliency, their tenacity, their kindness and love of other people. I'm proud of my time in the Navy. I'm gonna tell you what, I'm proud of being married for 39 years. And again, I don't know if I need to be proud of that or she needs to be, I'm just proud that I got lucky and met the right person. But I think to do anything for 39 years is an accomplishment that I'm very proud of.
Yeah, that's really good. Man, I'm looking like I was you were earlier on, the audio was coming in and out, and now I just went out.
Yeah, I saw that you did pop out.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it's my end, but anyway, for a podcaster to have audio problems, I better get that thing checked. All right, so what kept you grounded or brought you joy over the years? Family, hobbies, passions.
Yeah. Family for the most part. I think family has always been critical. Family was very critical to me. My dad's father passed when he was 9 years old. So family was very, very critical to my dad, and having a family that was close was very critical to him, even in his time in the Navy. And he worked hard and worked nights, but having that family, and I think I carried that and worked real hard to make sure that my children and my wife and I were a good family unit, and our extended family, cousins, uncles. Real proud of that. That's kept me grounded. Understanding that, there's no bullshit when you come home, right? You can, sorry for the PG, I guess bullshit's PG, right?
Yeah.
You can tell your friends, your coworkers a lot of tales. You can wear a lot of masks if you want to. When you come home, you need to take that armor off, and you need to take that mask off, and you need to be real. And that's kind of helped to keep me grounded. And I'm proud of those relationships that I've built at home because of that.
Yeah, that is awesome. So, have you reconnected with anyone from your class over the years, or is, just like in the last few years, like Fred had a couple people that reconnected? Being that you've been around, has there been anybody that you've reconnected in the last few years?
It's funny, and we can all now, and since it's been around for so long, dismiss Facebook or social media all we want to, and rightfully so. I think it can be a really bad thing. The one thing that I think it still resonates and accomplishes is how it connects people who would not normally stay connected. I think I've gotten closer with Andy Brower through social media and Navy connections and references and how that I would have otherwise. I was political for a little while on Facebook, which was a fool's game, but we just didn't know how foolish we were. And I connected with people through that way, and I think I alienated some people through that way. Jamie Carn, I apologize for anything I might have said that was uncomfortable, but I think that it lets you connect in that way. So, I've always, tried to stay in touch with, who I could, where I could. I had to do the reunions. Dave Hillgrove, it's hard not to stay in touch with Dave. He's constantly reaching out and trying to keep the thing together. And I think that's I don't know that people give Dave enough credit for that, because I do think he's sort of been the glue that holds things together a little bit. And I guess he follows me on this. Yeah, it's been a number of people, and I hate to leave anybody out, but yeah, it's been good.
That's good. So, all right. So if you could sum up your journey in a few words or a short story, what would it be?
I don't know if you remember this or not, and he didn't teach the class when we were there, but at one point prior to us being at Benedictine, Coach Crowder taught biology. And I remember him telling us this story in only the way that Coach Crowder could tell it. And I hear he's going to be at the reunion, so I'm really happy to hear that. But I remember him talking about giving a biology exam and writing the question that, what is life? And somebody wrote as the answer to the question, life is a never-ending story. And apparently it impressed Coach Crowder greatly. He gave the guy an A on the exam or whatever it was. I remember thinking to myself, that was cheating. Ha, ha, ha. I thought it was really funny. But, as life has gone on, those words have proven truer and truer every day, that it is a story, right? And it's a story that you can write. And you can write it every day, because you turn the page and you write that story. And it's funny, what I took as something that I was ridiculing, back when I was 16 or 17 or whenever Coach told that story, to the point now where I'm looking at it as kind of a metaphor for my life. And that's a long story. That's a hell of a journey. Yeah. But yeah, it's if I could sum it up, it's been a story. It's been a great story. And I think when we wrote our biographies, and very little of what I wrote was true. There was truth in almost everything I wrote, but it was a story, and I wanted it to be a story, and I wanted to just to illustrate it as a story and a metaphor, and just something fun to do, which I think sums it up and sort of tells the story of my life in that sense.
Well, what I admire when people can write, because that was not my thing. But I have some people that help me now. So I'm going to take the bios and we're going to put them in to an AI function and have it as a video. So it'll be, I don't know if we can have you as a face on it, but we're going to get as close as we can to really telling it as a story. Because maybe I'm challenged reading and writing, so I go for the alternative. So hopefully the time we can get it done, if people
that'd be great.
Bios
I think AI opens up a whole world of possibilities,
Yeah.
And it gives us some things and some ability to have fun where we might not have had before. Full disclosure, I didn't use AI other than to correct some spelling, some grammar, but
it's changing our world, and it's going to change fast. But a couple years ago, my partner has an AI agency up in Canada, and a couple years ago, as we were like after my stroke, he encouraged me to get into podcasting golf wise, and I wasn't playing it, so I didn't really connect with it. But here's what he kept saying: he'd say, "Peter, you using AI?" I said, "I don't have time for that. I'm doing my podcast," and he would say, "Just play with it." And he kept pushing and pushing. And when I did my first course, if you would have told me, I basically went a couple times with it, but the first time I saw the power of it, it spit out one of my frameworks for a course I was doing in like 10 seconds.
And the prompt engineering piece is incredible. I mean, if you write the best prompts, it's incredible. But you can refine your prompts as you go. We're doing a lot now. Well, I say we, as I'm consulting with the company, we're doing a lot with with Copilot and Microsoft and Agent Force within Salesforce, where we're building actually built an agent bot after an experimental thing in a course, which I never thought I would do. But it's to me, it is very exciting. My son laughs at me how excited I get about technology because he's just on the front line of it every day. And I go, God, isn't this cool? And he's got, yeah, Dad, some things never change, right?
Yeah. And they're growing up in it. We we moved into it. So we see it moving so fast. Their life is different because technology was coming in and it was just a part of growing up. And so their perspective is completely different. Yeah,
and I look at the 7-year-old and I go, it's incredibly different, the things that they understand or don't understand and how they understand it. So
yeah, it is. Well, with Fred, he was back to back, but Dave is not coming on for a little bit. So I want to just wind it down. What would be the one thing that you would want our viewers to take home from our podcast today?
To come down off of a lot of the things that we all are so certain of in life and be open to other views, be open to other people, to be open to different things. And I don't mean in the sense of anything necessarily political, but to be open to experience things that you may never have thought about experiencing before, especially as now we're, many of us, not all of us, but some of us are retired. Some of us are got one foot in, one foot out, whatever. Be open to experience, be open to whatever comes next, and maybe not worry about the plan and let the plan come through, and bring passion to what you do.
It's awesome. That is really good. I will say, just thought of it. Where are you guys living? Is it West End or
We live in Deltaville?
Deltaville?
Yeah,
Okay.
we bought a house.
Deltaville. Okay, down by the river. Okay.
Yeah, we bought a house when the kids were like elementary, middle school age for weekends and summer, and then when they moved on, I was still working, but I was flying like 5 out of 7 weeks, and my wife said, I don't want to live in this house anymore. I want to live at the river. So we moved to the river, and my commute to the airport was maybe about another 15, 20 minutes, but it's all good. We live down here. I'm looking out at the water now, and
that's beautiful. Yeah, there's a landing down there. Gosh, it's not right in Deltaville, but there's a boat landing that's I'm trying to think of what it is, but we used to go down there quite a bit with my former wife's family. I'm trying to think. Oh gosh, it's on the tip of my tongue, but I'm sure it's still there. It's a big landing. But anyway, but I know Deltaville is right next to it. The reason I was asking is, because as we retire, we repack the bags, and I think we might even mention that a couple weeks ago when we were talking. I was in Rotary 25 years ago, and then I reconnected with somebody. Most of the people in mine, it's about 125 people, very diverse people that serve. And I went to the Richmond Country Club. I went to 2 Rotaries when I was up there last. One was like the old Rotary. I will tell you where I went. And the other was Richmond Country Club. And it was young, old, black, white, male, female nationalities. And it was just a good group of people. And they meet on Friday morning. So if you want to get yourself out of Deltaville and come on up, I'm going to go 2 Fridays while I'm there, because I'll be flying. Let's see. No, maybe not 2. I'm flying up to BWI for my nephew's wedding, and then I'm going to come back to Richmond on Saturday. So I'll be there till till the reunion. So I'll be there a couple Fridays. I think just maybe one. Okay, now that I think about it. But anyway, it's wonderful to give back and to,
Sure.
as we do different things, because our experiences help us, to make the community a whole lot better. I don't even know if Deltaville has a Rotary Club.
I'm sure they do. I
They
don't know, but I'm sure they do.
All right, Peter Maxwell, it's been a pleasure. I look forward
Enjoyed
to
this.
I look forward to hanging out when we come up there and spend a few more minutes, and then I get to bring up things you said on the podcast, and I can go a little deeper in some answers that we can go on. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good, and look forward to seeing you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye.